My name's Heidi Michelle. You can find me on Facebook at Heidi Michelle. You can find me on Instagram at Heidi Michelle Writings, and you can also find me on Amazon Kindle. You can find my book Phoenix in December. There's an ebook on there. There's also a paperback edition. I'm also getting ready to do a second book, so that is shortly coming here in the fall. And part of the listeners, if you do follow me on Facebook and you decide that you want to be a subscriber, then I have the audiobook for free that I'm going to send only to the subscribers. So that is my special gift to you.
Thank you very much for that. So take us through the genesis of this. You mentioned there's a diagnosis. So what did the doctors say? What was going on with you way back when?
Well, when I was younger, up until the point where I was about 4 years old, I was a tiny, tiny child. I was like my dad, always lots of energy, never wanting to eat. They had trouble getting me to gain weight. And then all of a sudden, when I started school about 7 years old, they started noticing that I started gaining weight, but yet I had these skinny arms and legs and this big pregnant belly. The kids would make fun of me, jumping rope and, oh, here comes Heidi. And are you pregnant? How did you get pregnant at 9, Heidi? And I would go home and I would cry and cry and cry. And finally, I was living with my grandparents, and my mom was a nurse. But both of my parents were gone, obviously, since I was sent to live with my grandparents. So they decided to take me to the doctor on their own. And they got a diagnosis that I was hypothyroid. And that was the reason why I was tired all the time, why I was gaining weight, even though I wasn't eating, why I was having memory loss, dry skin, just all kinds of different symptoms that I couldn't get rid of. I went to finally got the diagnosis and they got me on the medicine. When they did get me on the medicine, it was too high of a dose. So they sent me to the hospital and I had to have a spinal tap and have all that fluid drained off. And so they finally got my medicine regulated and got me on a good dose and got me back in school. But still, it took time to lose that weight. It still took time to get over that trauma. And just starting that in grade school and going to school with people that have known you your whole life. You stayed in the same town your whole life. You get teased no matter if you lose 60 pounds, you're still the fat girl.
I look at like the childhood for a lot of people who are overweight, and it is quite difficult because they get bullied and they get picked on, right? Like
Right.
because you stand out. It's not like you can hide your size. Like I know some people try their best with baggy clothes and loose fitting clothing, but I think for a lot of women, because women tend to wear more fitted clothing, you start to stand out. And as you mentioned, right, like they were teasing you and saying that, oh, how did you get pregnant at such a young age because of your
Right.
stomach and things like that. And I remember there was a time where I was bullied a little bit in school, and a lot of people thought that it was like your trial, meaning that you had to go through this to survive school because everybody goes through it. But speak to us about how it felt to be singled out because of your size. And it's something that you necessarily can't hide in a lot of ways.
It was very lonely. I had a very small group of friends that I can say I still have to this day because we were kind of like the group of oddballs of the school. We were the nerds, we were the fat kids, the people that just didn't fit into with the cheerleaders and the jocks and everybody else. So we found support amongst each other. But for the most part, going to school, I would beg my grandparents and eventually my mom, just please don't make me go to school today, because it was just torture every single day. Every single day I knew, matter what I did, what I wore, how I spoke, what makeup I did, how I did my hair, how I walked down the hallway. It didn't matter what I was going to do. They were still going to make fun of me because I was an open target to them. I allowed it to happen so many times, and I never stood up for myself, and I never said no.
The kids that go through bullying, they feel so powerless. Like you, right? Like you go into school and it's supposed to be a place where you're very social, you're very young, and it's the time of your life, right? And here you are not wanting to go to school, right? Were there times where you felt like you just didn't belong in this world?
There have been many times when I felt I just didn't belong in this world. I mean, especially in high school, I felt I didn't belong there because I wasn't tall, I wasn't thin, I wasn't one of the pretty girls or the cheerleaders. There have been times when, even when I was in church, I grew up in church in a Pentecostal church of all things, where we were taught, that we're to be soft spoken, and that we're, not to beautify ourselves, that we are to down ourselves. And it took me leaving that atmosphere to realize that I was being controlled and manipulated, that we were created, if we're supposedly created in God's image, then that's a beautiful thing. And we want to be able to have self-love for ourselves. And being in church, even people made fun of me in church, because people are people no matter where you go. People are going to make fun of you at church. They're going to make fun of you at high school. They're going to make fun of you at work. And I think it takes a strong character just to say, you know what? It doesn't matter. I don't matter to you. You don't matter to me. So let's just go on and agree to disagree.
One of the ways that
I
I was
mean,
able to overcome that, sorry to interrupt you, was I had to find a way to love myself
yeah,
outside of what the type of love I wanted for other people. I look back at high school, especially because middle school was a little bit different. I look at high school, especially because your body's changing in so many different ways because many of us are going through puberty at that time, right? Now kids go through puberty at like 1 years old, right? Right. But back then it was a little bit different. I look at some of what the men and women are going through, and just having your body change because of puberty opened you up to ridicule. But if you add in the fact that you're overweight, which is still to this day viewed in a negative light, right? Like you look at online, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but you look at like online dating, right? And a lot of men are like, if you're going to ask us how tall we are, we need to ask you how much you weigh, right? Because they look at weight as such a turnoff, even though they can still be attractive in their own way or
right.
attractive to other people, right? Like a preference is a preference, but I don't think we should bully someone or put them down because of their preference. And I wonder how many people end up with thoughts of self deleting or maybe causing themselves harm because of what they went through as a child. So, for your childhood, were there times where you had dark thoughts or you had experiences where you didn't know where it was going to take you in the future?
Oh, there were definitely times I had dark thoughts, and it's why I had to start writing, because it was something that I would dream about at night, because I would try and hide it because of the type of family that I grew up in. I didn't want them to know about that I dreamt about, that I wanted to hurt myself because I was so sad. And people just kept making me go to school. They didn't understand the torture that I was going through. So I started writing about it. And I found the more that I wrote about it, that the easier it kind of got, because I got some of that poison out of me by writing. and just kind of like, saying, this is what happened, this is how I felt about it, and this is what I'm going to do about it. It was kind of like an ABC thing for me, but writing was my biggest thing that brought me out of the dark spaces because um there are times in life, especially, when I got older and I was going through my first marriage trying to raise kids, and then that marriage didn't work because of certain things happening. And now I'm a single mom raising two kids, one that has a disability. And the only thing that kept me going was my love for my kids. My love for my kids and my writing was my therapy. But
How much,
sometimes you have to look beyond yourself to find a reason for that.
how strong did you have to be to find the love of your children and the love of writing to get you out of that situation mentally and not and as well as physically?
I actually had a situation where, with my ex-husband, I was getting ready. We were in a physical altercation. The police had been called, and he had my youngest son and was trying to drag him through the yard and take him away. And I don't know what it was, but something just snapped in me and said, "Go get your kid. Do whatever you have to do to get your kid, get him, and keep him safe." And inside, I was shaking like a leaf from the inside. I was scared. I was petrified because this is a man who, when I look at him now, I laugh. I'm like, I was scared of that. I'm just like, man, that shows you how far I've come, because I'm like, I look at that my ex-husband now, I'm like, oh man, there's no way I'm scared of him now. But when I was going through it, I was like, this is God's fire getting ready to come down on me, and I'm trying to challenge it because I'm trying to take my kid back. But my kids were everything to me, especially my youngest kid, because he was the one that was with a disability that he didn't have a voice to tell his dad no. He didn't understand what was going on. He was scared and afraid himself. So I got both of my boys and I locked us in the bathroom and I called 911, and they came and got my husband and took him away so I could get my stuff and go to a safe place. But it took the thought of losing everything that I love to gain that strength to go after and face the enemy and get back what belonged to me in the first place.
It seems a lot of people, for them to find the strength, they have to hit rock bottom. They have to feel absolutely powerless,
Yes,
right? Like when I look at my experiences with dealing with people who've gone through this, not me personally, but people who have told me this, it is such a long lasting impact on their life. Some people never truly get over it. They still see themselves. Like when they look in the mirror, they still see that big person. They still see that weaker person. They still see that um, powerless person, right? And then there's some people, once they're able to overcome it, like you said, right? They're like, I was afraid of him. I was afraid of her. Right? This person is nothing to me. It's like that movie Django Unchained, right? They finally got their vengeance on everybody. Everybody's
right,
dying, right?
right,
But the sad part is those who don't necessarily overcome it because they still have their triggers. And when I look on the social interaction now, especially when you go to, let's say, social media, for example, right, which we're both on and we both have a presence on there, you see a lot of people who are presented with bodies that are very unattainable. You either have to get surgery or you have to do some type of filtering, right? For you, as someone that has battled the other side, like I haven't been big, I was very thin. So my struggle was the other way to get to a healthy weight, right? From one
right.
spectrum, yours is the other spectrum, right? So when you look at those images, is there any thoughts in your mind saying that, this is a reminder of what I used to be like triggering you in a way?
There are thoughts in my mind that remind me when I still compare myself to other women. Like, because me and my husband like to go to rock shows, and there are some beautiful, beautiful women there. And I have actually met, some celebrities that are beautiful women, and I'm just like awestruck. And I'm like, man, I want to be like you. But then I go and find out that the most beautiful woman in the world, Marilyn Monroe, was a size 14, which is the size of the average woman in America. And the whole time during high school, I was probably a 14. I was probably average size, but because I wasn't a two or a one or a zero. But
Did did you
yeah,
think that that was an issue for you, seeing that your average size, but you're being teased, but the people who are unhealthy size, but let's be honest, a size zero and a size one is unhealthy the other way, right?
right.
But they're getting praise. Like, was there difficulty in you understanding how you were kind of being put down for being average, which most of us are, versus someone who is an unhealthy weight, but you're like, okay, why are they paying attention to that when this is how everyone normally looks like?
I think my understanding of it was kind of a generational understanding. I mean, we grew up with supermodels that, it was the thing to have the tiny little waist and be the perfect Barbie doll little figure. And if you weren't that, then you weren't a sexy woman. So, I mean, I think it was a generational thing that was just kind of pounded into the head. I mean, because I'm not afraid to say, I'm 51 years old. And during when I was growing up in the early 70s and 80s, that's all we seen was, a sexy model with a tiny little waist and big boobs and nice little butt, drinking a Diet Coke or smoking a cigarette. That's all we seen on TV because we were the first generation to probably, you know, have the TV as our babysitter. So that's what was ingrained into our head. We got to look like that. We got to look like that girl on TV or the magazines that we all read. My gosh, like Tiger Beat and all those different things we used to read that we save the pictures on our walls of the people that we want to be and make vision boards. But I think it's a more now that I've gotten older that it doesn't really matter what everybody else thinks of me. It matters what I think of me. It matters if I take a look at myself and realize how far I've came, that I used to be the fat girl. I used to be the introverted, shy person that never stood up for herself, that never said no, that gave in to everything. And I made myself very unhappy because I lived for others.
I gave one of my friends, she was going through something like that where she was battling body image. She thought she was becoming obese. She isn't. But in her mind, she thought that she was, right? But she gained a couple of pounds and she didn't like the way her clothes looked. And one thing I did as a joke, I told her that, you know what I do? Is anytime there's a part of my body that I don't like, I give it like a fancy name. So, for example, if your stomach's getting a little bit bigger, you call it a love pouch. The bigger the pouch, the more love you have inside, right?
Yes.
And she started to do that, but it was like a humorous way, but it was a way to lessen the stress, right? Like someone will look at their arms, oh, I have a little bit of fat under my arms. Someone look at their belly, their legs, their whatever. Now we appreciate fat as long as it's in certain places. So, for example, big boobs is fat,
Right.
right? A big butt is fat.
Right.
Now, these days, you can inject whatever it is you want into them. So maybe they're not always all fat, but they're supposed
True.
to be, right? It's the waist that I guess throws a lot of people off, but it looks unnatural, right? When they have the very tiny waist and then the big hips and then it flares out. What I think we have to get back to is not necessarily saying that, okay, you're overweight and obese. Yes, these are medical terms, but let's figure out how healthy you are, right? Are you a healthy size 10? Are you a healthy size 8? Are you a healthy size 14? Are you an unhealthy size 2? Are you an unhealthy size 4? There's a time in human existence where when you looked at someone who had a little meat on them, you knew that was a good thing because when you're looking to maybe mate with them and for them to build children, they have something to protect the child, to help with that pregnancy, right? So I think we have to find a balance. I think we've gone too far the other way. And this is something that impacts women so much more than men because women in general are viewed as visual, like beauty objects, where men are viewed as financial objects, right? Like in general, we look for men for, okay, what can they provide? We look for women, okay, how feminine is she? How nice she looks? Things of this nature. When you mentioned that you're able to overcome it and you wrote a book about it, take us through the book. Is it tackling some of the social conditioning that is placed on people, or is it more so maybe your experiences and how you were able to combat that?
I think my very first book that I wrote, Phoenix in December, is mostly about my earlier years and how I combated being fat, how I combated feeling disconnected from the world, how I combated feeling alone, um, how I combated, also, I wasn't not only the fat girl, I was also the fat Pentecostal girl. So I had two things working against me. So I also combated that with, more writing, more music, more singing. But um, in my book, I talk about the loss and the grief, and it's kind of like a loss of yourself. But I also talk about making new steps, making new beginnings, trying to find yourself again, trying to find love, and trying to find beauty in the world, trying to find something every morning to wake up and be grateful for, and not being so hung up on what you don't have and what you don't look like. Because to me, I mean, my favorite poem in my book is Dreams, and dreams are all about what our subconscious, is not allowed to express or think about during the day. So in our dreams, we can be whoever we want to be. We can be a beautiful movie star, but that movie star in reality may not be that beautiful after all the makeup and everything is taken off. So, um, I mean, my book, Phoenix in December, the first one, is just kind of about me going through that process as a child and learning to find ways to heal and accept myself and realizing that maybe me growing up in a church atmosphere like that maybe wasn't the best for me because I was always being told what was wrong with me and what I could do better instead of being encouraged, Heidi, you're a really good writer. Heidi, you're a really good psalmist. Heidi, can you help us with this? We'd love your input. You seem like a very creative being. But it was always judgment, judgment, judgment. So I kind of forsaken that, especially after I lost my mom last year. And I just found a new love for myself. I still pray every day. I don't call it prayer, but I do take the time for myself to just kind of be quiet and just quiet my mind, what my friend calls the monkey mind, the chatter in your head when you're trying to go to sleep and won't ever shut up. I mean, this is kind of what I was going through right at that moment. So the Phoenix in December book touches a lot on overcoming those childhood wounds, overcoming those mindsets, overcoming that negative attitude and kind of adapting more of a positive mindset and loving yourself and not being so hard on yourself because everybody else out there is going to be hard enough on you. You don't need to do it to yourself.
How much of a negative impact did the church have on you when you're trying to um, define your body image when you were overweight?
Um, Unfortunately, the church had a very negative impact on me because I my family was very close friends with the pastors in this town, and the churches that we went to, I seen a lot of stuff go on behind the scenes. And the last church that I was at was a lifelong friend of mine, and I adored him growing up. You know, kind of had like a little crush on him because my mom was a labor and delivery nurse. She delivered him. So, but he was the pastor's son, so he was the one that always got in trouble. And we kind of always had this relationship. You know, you keep my secrets, and we're cool. But I remember one Sunday I had just got done sitting down from our praise and worship service, and there was a young lady in front of me, and she looked like maybe she might be going through a hard time, and she was just, you know, kind of quietly crying to herself. And I went and sat next to her and softly spoke to her and asked her if she was okay, and she explained to me what was going on. And next thing I know, the ushers from the church, because our church was starting to get bigger. We started out at 250 people. And at the time when I left, we were well over 1,500. We were having three services. So the big bodyguard ushers came by. They told us both to get out. So I waited until after service and I talked to my pastor friend and I said, where have we gone wrong in this? I said, are we not about helping people? Are we not about helping the hurt and the lost anymore? I said, or is this all just a show where we all have to sit and shut up and be quiet and listen to you? And he said, I hate to tell you, he goes, but it's the latter.
How did that make you feel?
Uh, It broke my heart because this was my lifelong friend that I told everybody about. I was like, you've got to go to this church. This, you know, this huge church. You know, he's, you know, been trained by some of the best preachers in the world in the industry, and you know, he can start a fire in a mud puddle, and you've got to go see this guy. And I was just all for him. And then all of a sudden, it became commercial to me. It wasn't about the people. It wasn't about the healing. It wasn't about the compassion. It was about the love anymore. It was about the fame. It was about the money. It was about the notoriety. And I told him, I said, you know, I actually seen him probably a couple of months ago, um, at another funeral. I've lost quite a bit of people in my life this year. But it was a lady that actually took care of both of us when we were younger in daycare, and he was preaching her funeral. And he chose not to come to my mom's funeral for some reason, but he chose to come by me right before he got ready to preach at our friend's funeral and looked at me and said, hey, Heidi, we've been friends for a really long time. And I said, yeah. He's like, good times, right? I just kind of looked at him. I was like, man, if we weren't in the middle of a funeral home, but no, not good times. Not good times because it was somebody that I trusted, somebody that I thought I could trust with my life that broke, you know, not broke my heart like he was my boyfriend or I was in love or anything, but broke my heart because I believed in him. And I quote unquote put my faith in the wrong thing. I put my faith in man.
That's a struggle that a lot of people, I believe, have when it comes to religion. They start off initially putting their faith into the religion, and then what happens is some of that faith ultimately ends up into a person, and then
Hmm.
it gets deciphered, right? It gets siphoned off from the religion into a man, into a person, into a woman, and then eventually you go from, let's say, a full cup of faith in the religion, and then it's half, and then you're split between a man or a woman and the religion. And then when the man or the person or the woman disappoints you, you're disappointed as a whole, when many times it's our fault for believing in the person instead of into our faith.
Right.
Right? Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that because there are so many, like I said, I have grown up around pastors and religion, and there are so many people up there that they proclaim that, they are gods and we should believe in them. And I don't agree with that. I think your faith needs to be in what you believe in, what you believe to be true. What is your truth? Don't let somebody else tell you what your truth is. That's always been my big thing. And that was my thing with my friend. I said, you're trying to tell me that what's right for your life is right for mine. I said, I'm trying to tell you that you're wrong. I said, what you're meant to do in life is not my pathway. I said, if I followed you for very long, I said, I'd be lost. I said, because
So,
I would lose myself.
so Heidi, as we look to close, what's some advice that maybe you want to provide to those who are battling their body image, looking for areas of support, but maybe are getting disappointed in where they have gone so far, such as friends, family, religion? How would you guide them?
I would tell them, first of all, take a fast from social media. Don't don't look at all the pictures and stuff of girls posting, these duck mugs, I call them, of themselves, doing the duck lip poses, trying to make themselves look all pretty and everything, because that gets in your head. It gets in your head and you start coming down on yourself thinking, why don't I look like that? Sometimes I've just had to take even if it's just a week to 10-day break from social media, just to realize that I was made a certain reason for a certain purpose, and it's okay to be me. I've given my, I had to give myself permission to be me. I had to give myself permission to speak up for myself, to love what I look like when I look in the mirror. I mean, even though there are still days when I don't want to, but I at least get up and look in the mirror every day and say, "Man, you look good." And I try and carry that with me some days. Um, I do use meditation as a good guide for me because it calms me down. It takes the focus off of all the other stuff going on around you and takes that monkey mind of yours that's feeding you the lies that you're not good enough, that you're not pretty enough, that you're not this, you're not that. It's taking that focus off and it's showing you who you really are and what you're really capable of. And once you realize all that, none of that other stuff matters.
How different
Being
is it for you now regarding the person you see in the mirror today versus the person you used to see in the mirror back then?
the person I seen in the mirror back then, she was obviously a lot younger and had firmer skin. But the person I see in the mirror today is I've raised two sons. I In my second marriage, I have two grandkids. I have a successful job as a disability rights advocate that actually pays me. So, I do still advocate for other people because I absolutely, because of my own treatment, cannot stand the mistreatment of others. So I get up in the mirror every day and I look at myself and I feel good about myself because I feel good about what I'm doing. I feel good about where I'm heading in life. I feel good that I've made changes. I feel good that I finally realized that I'm perfectly imperfect.